The judge's final words echoed through the silent courtroom like a hammer striking glass. A single father walked out of divorce court carrying nothing but a worn backpack, a folder of custody papers, and the crushing weight of losing nearly everything he had spent 20 years building. His former wife smiled with quiet satisfaction as she drove away in the luxury SUV that had once belonged to them both. Spectators whispered that his life was over. But less than 15 minutes later, the deafening roar of helicopter blades filled the bright afternoon sky, and a sleek helicopter descended onto the open field beside the courthouse. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. The broken man everyone had pitied calmly walked toward it as if he had been expected all along, and in that unforgettable moment, everyone realized they had judged the wrong person. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing community. Garrett Holloway had never measured success by expensive watches or enormous houses. At 46, he believed the greatest achievement of his life was raising his 12-year-old daughter, Elsie. Long before the divorce, Garrett had been the kind of father who never missed a school concert, never forgot a birthday, and never allowed work to become more important than family. He had once built a respected aviation engineering company with two close friends, but several years earlier he quietly stepped away from public leadership after suffering severe exhaustion and wanting to spend more time with his daughter. He transferred operational control to trusted executives while keeping his ownership private. Very few people outside the company knew he still held the majority of its shares. His wife, Vanessa, gradually grew frustrated with Garrett's quieter lifestyle. She admired status, luxury, and public recognition far more than simple family dinners or weekends fishing by the lake. She began believing that Garrett had become an ordinary middle-aged man who lacked ambition. Unknown to Garrett, she secretly assumed he had sold his business years ago for far less than it was worth. She measured his faded pickup truck and modest clothing as evidence that he had become financially insignificant. The divorce became long, bitter, and painfully public within their small city. Vanessa hired aggressive attorneys determined to leave Garrett with almost nothing. Garrett refused endless arguments because every angry exchange seemed to hurt Elsie more than himself. Instead of fighting over furniture, jewelry, or expensive possessions, he quietly surrendered nearly everything. He accepted a smaller home. He accepted fewer financial assets. He accepted countless insults without responding. The only battle he fought was for meaningful time with his daughter. The courtroom had been crowded that afternoon because Vanessa's attorney had confidently predicted a complete legal victory. By the time the hearing ended, Garrett walked out with little more than personal belongings and shared custody arrangements. Several strangers watching outside assumed they had witnessed the destruction of another broken man. Garrett slowly descended the courthouse steps into the warm sunshine. His shoulders looked heavy, but his face remained peaceful. He had learned long ago that losing possessions was painful, but losing dignity was a choice. He paused beneath a large oak tree, closed his eyes for a brief moment, and took a slow breath. The afternoon breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass from a nearby park where children laughed without understanding how quickly adult lives could change. Then his phone vibrated. The message was brief: "Everything is ready. The board has unanimously approved today's announcement. We are waiting for you." Garrett looked toward the open municipal landing field across the street. Moments later, the distant sound of rotor blades grew louder. People shaded their eyes from the bright afternoon sun. The helicopter descended with remarkable precision before settling gently onto the marked landing area. It carried the polished logo of Horizon Aeronautics, one of the fastest-growing aerospace companies in North America. Reporters who had been covering unrelated business news immediately recognized the aircraft and rushed closer. A sharply dressed executive stepped out first before opening the passenger door with genuine respect. Instead of greeting Garrett like an employee, he welcomed him like family. Garrett smiled politely, shook his hand, and climbed aboard. Vanessa stood frozen beside her attorney. She recognized the company logo instantly. Months earlier she had proudly invested in Horizon Aeronautics because financial magazines described it as one of the most valuable private aviation companies in the industry. Only then did an impossible question begin forming in her mind: why would Horizon send one of its executive helicopters for Garrett? Across the city, the helicopter landed beside Horizon's headquarters where hundreds of employees had gathered outside beneath the clear afternoon sky. Engineers, technicians, pilots, mechanics, receptionists, interns, and senior executives applauded as Garrett stepped onto the landing pad. Many of the newest employees had never met the company's founder. They only knew stories about the quiet engineer who believed every employee deserved respect, stories about the owner who secretly paid medical bills for struggling workers. Stories about scholarships created for employees' children, stories about bonuses issued during difficult years even. When profits declined, the chairman stepped forward and embraced Garrett warmly. He publicly announced that after years of allowing others to manage daily operations, Garrett Holloway was returning as executive chairman to lead the company's newest expansion into emergency medical aviation technology. News cameras broadcast the announcement across television and social media before the afternoon ended. The city that had pitted Garrett only hours earlier suddenly realized they had misunderstood everything. Garrett had never been poor. He had simply stopped living to impress strangers. While headlines celebrated the billionaire returning to leadership, Garrett spent the rest of the afternoon doing something almost no reporter covered. He visited the engineering workshop. He greeted technicians by name. He remembered birthdays. He congratulated apprentices on recent certifications. He asked custodians whether their children were enjoying school. The employees weren't loyal because Garrett was wealthy. They were loyal because he remembered that every person mattered. Meanwhile, Vanessa watched interview after interview replay across every news station. The realization struck harder than losing any lawsuit. She hadn't walked away from a poor husband, she had walked away from a deeply honorable man whose greatest wealth had never appeared in bank statements. Weeks passed. Garrett moved into a comfortable but surprisingly modest home with a large backyard where Elsie could continue practicing soccer. Although he could now afford almost anything, very little about his personal lifestyle changed. He still drove practical vehicles. He still shopped without bodyguards. He still volunteered at the local aviation museum on weekends whenever custody arrangements allowed. Elsie noticed something many adults failed to understand. Her father smiled more after the divorce than during the final years of the marriage. The sadness hadn't disappeared overnight. It had simply been replaced by peace. One Saturday afternoon, Garrett attended Elsie's school science exhibition. Most parents proudly displayed expensive projects built by professionals. Elsie arrived carrying a simple model rescue helicopter made almost entirely from recycled cardboard, wooden sticks, and glue. When judges asked about the project, she explained that real heroes don't rescue people because helicopters are expensive. They rescue people because someone cares enough to fly toward another person's worst day. Her words quietly moved every judge. She won first place. Garrett wasn't proud because she earned a trophy. He was proud because she had inherited compassion instead of bitterness. Across town, Vanessa's own circumstances gradually became more complicated. The luxurious lifestyle she had fought to preserve proved difficult to maintain. Several investments failed. Friends who once surrounded her slowly disappeared. When expensive vacations and exclusive parties ended, she began recognizing the painful difference between people attracted to wealth and people devoted to genuine relationships. One bright afternoon several months later, Vanessa unexpectedly visited Horizon headquarters. She wasn't seeking money, she wasn't asking for property, she simply wanted to apologize. Garrett welcomed her into a quiet conference room overlooking the company's aircraft testing field. There were no reporters. No lawyers. No dramatic speeches, only two people reflecting on years that could never be lived again. Vanessa admitted she had spent too much of her life chasing appearances while ignoring character. She confessed that somewhere along the way she had mistaken quiet humility for failure and kindness for weakness. Garrett listened without interruption. Years earlier he might have defended himself, now he simply understood that bitterness would imprison both of them forever. He accepted her apology without pretending the past had never happened. Forgiveness, he believed, was not permission for hurtful behavior. It was freedom from carrying endless resentment. Their marriage remained over, but hostility no longer needed to define their future as parents. From that day forward, co-parenting became healthier. Elsie no longer felt trapped between two wounded adults. Instead, she slowly watched them become respectful partners in raising her. Garrett used Horizon's growing success to expand emergency helicopter programs serving isolated rural communities. New aircraft delivered doctors, rescue teams, and life-saving equipment to places that had previously waited precious hours for help. Every helicopter carried a small inscription inside the cabin: "Success means little unless it lifts someone else." Most passengers never noticed the words. Garrett never asked anyone to. He simply hoped the crews remembered why they flew. Years later, during another warm afternoon, Garrett stood beside one of Horizon's newest rescue helicopters as hundreds of young engineering students visited the headquarters. One student nervously asked what the most important day of his life had been. Many expected him to mention founding the company or becoming wealthy. Instead, Garrett smiled gently. He explained that the most important day was the afternoon he walked out of divorce court believing he had lost everything, because that painful day forced him to discover what could never be taken away: integrity, love for his daughter, compassion, purpose. Those treasures had remained untouched even when everything else seemed gone. The students applauded, but Garrett looked toward Elsie, now preparing for university with dreams of becoming an aerospace engineer herself. She smiled with quiet pride. She had witnessed every chapter: the heartbreak, the humiliation, the unexpected helicopter, the forgiveness, the healing. And she understood that the helicopter had never been the true miracle. The miracle was that her father refused to let pain change the goodness inside his heart. Before we reach the end of this journey, leave a meaningful comment sharing what you believe is more valuable than money or success, because your words may encourage someone who desperately needs hope today. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. As the bright afternoon sun settled gently over the airfield, another rescue helicopter lifted gracefully into the clear blue sky. Garrett watched it disappear beyond the horizon with quiet gratitude. Years earlier he had walked out of a courthouse believing his future had been reduced to a backpack and a folder of papers. Instead, life revealed that character survives every courtroom, kindness outlives every betrayal, and hope often arrives with the sound of distant rotor blades. The greatest victories are rarely the ones that make headlines. They are the ones that restore a wounded heart, reunite a family with peace, and remind us that losing everything is sometimes the first step toward discovering what truly matters.